Well, here at the Aussie Wire, we've been following along a story that has global implications, and today we bring you an update that is very much local. Our correspondent Joanne Nova has brought to our attention the implications of ESG, the environmental social governance scores that massive global investment funds are kind of pushing onto a lot of different companies. Well, it seems like that problem might have come a little closer to home, and Joanne Nova joins us now to bring us an update on this story. Jo, welcome to the Aussie Wire once again.
Thank you, Topher, because this story is this close to my heart. I think this is one of the ones that's driving so much of the madness we see around us. You watch the news and you think, why on earth is the head of, pick a big company saying we have to get net zero and we need to do this witchcraft and change the weather? And, why are people who would normally be sensible, the big miners, the gas industry, why do they seem to be so on this bandwagon to do with the climate change thing? And this is the reason. The enormous funds that invest in these companies can vote directors out at board meetings. And they are telling these directors, these huge funds, and these are pension funds, so they're using your money to do it.
Sure.
They threaten these directors that if they don't get a good enough action plan and speak loudly about, solving the climate problem, that they will vote them out at the next board meeting. So the next AGM. So what we've got here is a huge, it's a big club to beat people down with, and they're isolating out any director who speaks up against this. So, here's how it works. Any crazy director of a BHP or whatever who thinks I might speak up and say, well, this is all silly, the idea that we can change the weather by putting up wind farms and things like that, they would get picked out by these giant superannuation funds who would then arrange a campaign to get rid of them at the next AGM. So we've got a direct line of money here, but the people who are in these funds, and I'll name them, this is the Australian Retirement Trust, ART. It's a $260 billion fund, Australia's second largest superannuation fund. That's 2.2 million members. Another fund is called Hester, $76 billion fund with nearly 1 million members. And they're mostly from health and community service, those members. And just the same as we saw in the US, these funds are using their members' superannuation as part of the club to beat these directors down with. But they're not asking their members, is this what you really want? Do you care about this? And do you mind us using your super funds as part of the threat to drive ESG changes in these companies and to silence and censor anyone who disagrees?
Well,
and to me, that's the real weak point. It's a bluff.
Well, the extraordinary thing is because they have so much money, and we can thank former Prime Minister John Howard for expanding the superannuation scheme and making sure that these people have these tens and indeed across all of them hundreds of billions of dollars to play with. Because they have a significant shareholding in so many different companies, they have this very rare thing. They have a genuine ability to end somebody's career because they can't just get them kicked out of the company where they're a director right now, but they can effectively blacklist them out of any of the companies in which they are significant shareholders. So that gives them an enormous amount of power, but it raises for me an interesting question. Where is the line between being a shareholder and obviously wanting to see directors do good things for your company and just outright almost blackmail and standover tactics? I mean, it is a little bit mafia-esque, is it not?
It is absolutely acting a bit like a cartel, especially when they all band together and say publicly, we're going to do this. But it's also, it's such a false thing to use other people's money to do this. And that's where we get back to fiduciary duty. And the aim of a super fund is, of course, supposed to be making its members richer so they can afford to retire for longer. And that was always the plan. But if these funds are going on a quest to change the global weather in true witch doctor kind of style, it may come at the expense of your retirement funds. Now, so here's what we need people to do. We need people to actually look up and check, is my retirement fund using these funds against me? I might be voting for lower energy costs. I might be hoping that we get a government that will solve these problems. But on the other hand, all my retirement savings for life that I've been forced to put into this fund are being used as a club to beat down these directors who dare to speak up and say the wrong thing. So the answer is people need to change. They need to check and they need to pull their super out of these funds, or at least send a letter to the super management saying, are you doing this? Is this, and to pressure those super funds into behaving as they should be behaving to look after their money rather than to use their money in a quest to bully companies. So this is really important. And when we look at ART, I call it unguarded money, this retirement fund money, because the government takes it off people when they earn it and sticks it straight into the fund. You don't get a choice. A lot of people just switch off. They don't pay attention. It's their money, but it's being used against them. And the Australian Retirement Trust, I think, was formed from two other funds only a year ago, and yet it's the second largest fund in Australia. And a lot of people wouldn't even be aware their funds were in the Australian Retirement Trust. So you really need to pay attention here. Where is that money gone?
Well, the question that springs to my mind, and I don't have an answer for it, so I guess this is kind of a question to our viewers, is are you aware of any superannuation funds that aren't playing these games? Is there a pro-human superannuation fund out there? Is there a super fund? Have you heard of vice funds, Joe? Is that a term that you're familiar with? The idea of a vice fund?
No, I'm thinking of the Strive Fund set up by Vivek Ramaswamy in the US to profit from it.
Yeah.
So I know there are a few funds, but in Australia, I'm not sure. And would they be allowed to mention that in the news?
Yeah, who knows? I mean, a vice fund, the whole concept is that there are certain things that human beings just do in good economic times and bad. So they'll invest in gambling and prostitution and alcohol and tobacco and all those things in any ways that are legal in their particular jurisdiction, because the theory is that no matter how bad things get, people are going to still spend money on that. I'm not proposing that, but I'm thinking, what about like a CO2 fund, a fund that specialises in supporting businesses that are going to help put carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere so that our biosphere can improve its health?
Oh, you're talking about a free market, Topher. How can you do that? Imagine that. Imagine having some choice. And imagine having a media that actually reported this fund so that people were thinking, well, do I really want my superannuation in that? Or can I invest in a super fund, which is like coal mines? Because I think that would be a better option for me and I'll get more money out of it when I retire.
Yes, indeed. Well, look, we're just going to have to watch how this plays out. I thank you for bringing this to our attention. This whole ESG thing is fascinating. The way that it's starting to interact with insurances is fascinating, but it's going to be a story that we're just going to have to keep covering and keep touching on from time to time as time passes. So, Joe, sorry, you've got more?
Just to press that button, environmental investors last year lost 22% compared to energy investors who made 54%. Now, last year was an extraordinary year because of the war in Ukraine and the price of coal and oil and whatnot. But it can make a very big material difference to your life if you do pay attention to where your retirement funds are and ask your fund whether it supports any of this kind of coercion and bullying, in order to get the mythical witch doctor craft of changing the weather 100 years from now.
Moving that thermostat. Well, Joanne Nova, thank you so much for the update. We will be staying across this story with your help as time goes by.
Thanks, Topher.